The heat struck me like a physical wall as I exited the Land Rover. Kruger National Park was 3 months into the worst drought in decades, and the landscape had become almost unrecognizable. Where lush vegetation once flourished, only withered brown scrub remained. Watering holes had shrunk to muddy puddles or vanished completely. The usually bustling savanna had grown eerily quiet as animals retreated deeper into the bush in a desperate search for water. I had been tracking this particular male lion for almost 6 hours. Wildlife conservation was more than my job, it was my life's work. After 15 years as a field researcher specializing in big cat behavior, I believed I had seen everything. Yet nothing prepared me for the sight that greeted me when I finally found him. He was young, probably around 4 years old, and clearly separated from his pride. His once magnificent mane hung limp and matted around his gaunt face. His ribs pressed sharply against his dull coat, and his movements were slow and unsteady. But it was his eyes that struck me most, once fierce amber orbs now glazed with exhaustion and, if I wasn't anthropomorphizing, a quiet resignation. Protocol dictated non-interference with wildlife, even during extreme conditions. Let nature take its course was the mantra drilled into every researcher and park ranger. Droughts were natural population controls, harsh but necessary ecological resets. We were observers, not interventionists. But as I watched him through my binoculars, struggling to even lift his head, something shifted inside me. This wasn't just any lion. This was LM-217, part of a research pride I had been monitoring since he was a cub. I had documented his first hunt, his eventual separation from his natal pride, his successful establishment of territory. Now, I was about to document his death from dehydration. The decision I made next would upend my career, my understanding of these magnificent predators, and ultimately change the course of my life. My name is Dr. Nathan Foster. This is what happened on that scorching afternoon in Kruger National Park and the extraordinary events that followed. I reached for the emergency water supply in my vehicle, 5 gallons I always carried for personal use during long research expeditions. Park regulations explicitly prohibited providing water to wildlife during droughts. Interfering with natural selection processes could have cascading ecological impacts, disrupting the delicate balance of predator-prey relationships. I knew this. I had written papers on this very topic. Yet I found myself unscrewing the cap of a water bottle, my hands operating independently of my professional judgment. LM-217, I had never named him, maintaining scientific distance, was barely responsive as I approached, a sign of how severely compromised his condition had become. A healthy lion would never allow a human this close. Keeping low and moving slowly, I stepped toward him, bottle extended. His head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as he caught my scent. A weak growl rumbled in his chest, a final feeble defense mechanism. Easy, I murmured, knowing my voice meant nothing to him but finding comfort in it nonetheless. I'm trying to help. He made no move to retreat or attack as I knelt several feet away, poured water into the bottle cap, set it down, and backed away. For several long moments, he didn't move, eyeing the offering with suspicion, or perhaps simple confusion. Then, urged by primal need, he dragged himself forward and lapped at the small pool. It disappeared instantly down his parched throat. I poured more, this time directly from the bottle, creating a small stream he could access more easily. He drank with increasing desperation, his rough tongue working frantically to capture every drop. I emptied the first bottle, then a second. By the third, his drinking had slowed, become more deliberate. Some vitality seemed to return to his eyes, along with something else, awareness of me, of the unnatural situation, of the shifting dynamic between predator and prey. I should have retreated then, returned to my vehicle, documented the encounter, and reported my violation to park authorities. Instead, I remained crouched just feet away from one of nature's most efficient killers, watching his strength gradually return with each swallow. What happened next defied everything I understood about wild lion behavior. LM-217 finished drinking, raised his head, and looked directly at me, not with aggression or fear, but with what I could only describe as focused attention. He held my gaze for several heartbeats, then deliberately stepped toward me. Every instinct screamed for me to retreat, to create distance between myself and the approaching predator. Yet something in his demeanor kept me rooted in place. He wasn't stalking or threatening. His movements, though still weakened, carried a different intention. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could feel his breath, smell the distinctive musk of his coat, close enough that he could have taken my life with a single swipe of his massive paw. Instead, he lowered his head and did something that sent a chill down my spine despite the oppressive heat. He pressed his forehead briefly against my outstretched hand, a gesture remarkably similar to how lions greet members of their pride, before turning away and walking with steadier steps toward the shade of a distant acacia tree. I remained frozen, my hand tingling where his rough mane had brushed against it, my mind struggling to process what had just occurred. In 15 years of field research, I had never witnessed or even heard of such behavior from a wild lion. It was as if he had acknowledged what I'd done, impossible as that seemed. When I finally regained my composure enough to return to my vehicle, I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the lion now resting in the distance. My hands shook as I made notes in my field journal, trying to document the encounter with scientific objectivity while knowing I would never report the full extent of what had happened. Who would believe me? Who wouldn't question my professional judgment, my observational reliability, even my mental stability? I decided to record only that I had observed LM-217, noted his compromised condition, and would return to check his status the following day. The water, the approach, the impossible moment of connection, these I kept to myself, a secret lodged between scientific knowledge and inexplicable experience. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, I reluctantly started the engine. Research protocol required me to maintain a broad patrol pattern, not focus exclusively on a single subject. I had other monitoring locations to check before darkness fell. "Hang in there," I whispered, though he was too far away to hear. "I'll be back tomorrow." I had no way of knowing that tomorrow would bring circumstances beyond anything I could have imagined, that my small act of intervention would trigger a chain of events challenging everything I thought I knew about these magnificent predators. That the line I'd crossed between observer and participant would permanently alter not just my research, but my fundamental understanding of the complex consciousness of the creatures I devoted my life to studying. As I drove away, glancing in my rearview mirror at the lion's recumbent form, I couldn't have anticipated that within 24 hours, I would find myself in a situation so extraordinary, so unprecedented, that it would ultimately divide the wildlife research community and force a re-examination of our entire approach to conservation ethics. I couldn't have known that the Rael story was only beginning.